What's better than earning money from a 9-to-5 job? It's earning money while you sleep, which is made possible if you start investing. You're listening to the Real Estate Investing Demystified with your very own dynamic duo, Ava Benesocky and August Biniaz. Tune in as we discuss everything real estate, both on the passive and active sides. We feature life-changing stories of today's real estate leaders that will help build your own roadmap to success. This is a show that will lead you to a diversified portfolio, a much bigger revenue, and a next-level venture that brings you a smooth cash flow. Let's get this episode started. All right, welcome back to Real Estate Investing Demystified. August, I wanted to quickly start our show off today by just sending our thoughts and prayers out to everybody in Florida after Hurricane Milton hit last night. It was a record-breaking storm that did do quite a bit of damage, but about 50% of the people that we knew evacuated. I think close to 1 million people evacuated from Florida. But we have obviously tons of boots on the ground there, and they're sending us videos, and it seems like everything is
play by play. They were sending us videos last night where they're living in a condominium. They didn't evacuate, and there's such heavy rain that is coming through the windows, and those
you barely see
windows,
outside.
are very strong, but the water was still coming through.
It was still coming through.
Obviously we own some properties in Florida, so we're going to update our investors on any type of damages, but most importantly, we want to make sure that tenants and our friends, everybody's safe, and our prayers go to everyone. So let's talk about our show today.
Our fascinating guest today, who's a broker, which is obviously near and dear to my heart, and a little bit near and dear to your heart as well, as we're both real estate brokers. Everybody who's listening to the show right now, I'm sure you either know somebody who's a real estate agent, maybe you're friends with somebody who's a real estate agent, they're part of your family, maybe you were a real estate agent.
There's lots of part-time
real estate agents. But the fascinating thing about the world of being a broker is really only 1% of people have success in this world.
Yes.
It's so competitive, especially even in the smaller cities.
Yes.
I started my real estate career when I was 22 years old in a very small town. Everybody knew, liked, and trusted me. So I was able to, kind of fast track myself on its way to success. But it just goes back to the story I always tell. And that was me chasing bigger opportunities in bigger cities. So I actually left the small city and I went to the big city, Vancouver.
Yes.
And I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to sell real estate that was triple or quadruple the price that I was selling back home. Now,
talking about big cities. I mean, there isn't a bigger city than New York, the Big Apple. I mean, that's a dream, right? If you make it in New York, you really make it anywhere. And our guest is in my opinion, the top broker in New York, and not just broker. We're talking about commercial broker, which is a totally
real estate broker.
When it comes, you're talking about selling buildings, and we're talking about billions of dollars. So exciting about that. But
yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to get into things today. So I'm going to go ahead, you guys. I'm going to introduce our guest, Bob Knakal. Now, Bob has been a broker in New York City since 1984. Having brokered the sale of over 22,339 buildings valued at around $22 billion. That's with the capital B. He co-owned and ran Massey Knakal Realty Services for 26 years, leading it to sell more than 3 times the properties of any competitor in New York City from 2001 to 2014. Now, Bob's leadership style, focusing on empowering his team, was a key to this success. After selling the firm to Cushman and Wakefield for $100 million, Bob's legacy remains with 29 companies in New York City investment sales today, run by those trained at Massey Knakal. Now, he's launched BK REA, a cutting-edge brokerage firm blending traditional real estate data with AI technology for the future of the industry. So welcome to the show today, Bob. We're really excited to have you here.
Welcome, Bob.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Now, Bob, please tell us about your background. And when you started in real estate, were you thinking of becoming one of the top brokers in the world? Or were you just trying to make a paycheck?
Well, Ava, actually, at the beginning, I didn't even want to get into real estate. So I'll tell you, it's so funny how the world works and how, I feel serendipity has played a great role in my life. I'll take you back to 1981. I was a freshman at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Wanted to be the next Gordon Gekko like every other Wharton kid. So I thought it would look good to get a summer job that would look good on my resume, working at an investment bank or commercial bank. So I drove around northern New Jersey, I grew up in a small town, Maywood, New Jersey, and I drove around Bergen County, dropping my resume off at every commercial bank and investment bank I saw, hoping to get a nice summer job. And I came out of a Payne Weber office, and across the hall, I saw Coldwell Banker. And I said, oh, great, another bank. I went in,
Oh, yeah.
I dropped my resume off, and they called me later that day and set up an interview for the following day. This was 1981, so there was no internet to look at. So I went to the library the next morning, and when I saw that Coldwell Banker was a bank, I was a real estate company. I almost didn't go on the interview. So, but they were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. Took the job, loved it. Went back my next 2 summers, and then started with CB in Manhattan when I got out of college in 1984. And I just really fell in love with the business right from day one. That first office that I worked in at CB was full of a lot of young, energetic, hardworking people. Seemed like they were having fun. They were happy. They were making money. I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. And I spent my first summer driving around looking at commercial properties, logging everything into a database. And it just was something that really resonated with me. I was very passionate about it. And I feel very, very blessed that I've been doing this over 40 years now. And I tell everybody, you know, it's not only my job, but it's also my hobby. So I found something that I truly love, and couldn't even imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, it's incredible. That brings us to today, over $22 billion of sales. But put that into perspective for us, Bob, because the word billion gets thrown around a lot. Put us into perspective of what is an average commercial broker sale, does sales per year? Kind of to give us an idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, we have a lot of big buildings in New York, so the dollar volume builds up pretty quickly, especially if you've been around for a long time. But I think the statistic that I enjoy more than that is the 2,300 now 41 properties that I've sold in New York. So that's a pretty good clip. That's about a building a week and a $10 million a week in sales. And so, you know, those are numbers that I'm proud of. But like I always say, you're only as good as your next transaction. So you have to keep focused on the next one and not think too much about the ones that you've finished up already.
Building a week, not a home
Not
week, but
bad.
building a week.
Building a week. Now I want to just get right into things and start talking about marketing. Because marketing back in the day was either intimate, it was face to face, it was shaking hands, or it was conventional, paying somebody money to get your face in, a newsletter or magazine. But the world has really changed now, we got Facebook ads, Instagram, Twitter, X, all kinds of different things, YouTube. And you can really never turn off the marketing machine, right? And to be noticed, you need to be always at the forefront of technology. Now, just watching you and really, really watching a lot of your podcasts, all the time here, if success leaves clues, you are really the poster child of evolution, because you have evolved with marketing, with a marketing strategy that exists with different brokers at different times, right? So is this really what sets you apart, Bob, from other brokers, because you were willing to change with the times?
Yeah, well, Ava, I don't know. Thank you. It's very flattering what you just said. I will tell you that I think as much as the world has changed, a lot of it has stayed the same. I think, 40 years ago when I started, you wanted to make people aware of your existence in the market, make them know you and think of you, be top of mind with them, and demonstrate that you have the capability to help them when they had a need to transact. And that is a fundamental thing that remains the same today. Now, the strategies and tactics that we use to establish those things have changed over time. Some of them remain the same. Some of them are very simple prospecting calls, which still it's my number one goal every week, to speak to 100 property owners every week, get around to ask them if there's anything they want to sell. But you have to send your email blasts out and send your text messages. And I still send hard mail, which I think is very underrated, but has a lot of shelf life. And you have to do your networking and create content and be on social media and speak at real estate events and things like that to become known. One of my catchphrases I always use is that in real estate, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. You know, for instance, there are 175,000 investment properties in New York City. There are 250,000 people that are owners of those 175,000 buildings. And I make a lot of calls, but I can't call 250,000 people. So it's important that people know you. So,
but it's
I'll
not
be
only those conventional stuff, Bob. It's also the fact that when Twitter X comes out, you get on there and you become one of the top guys on retweet. How do you achieve that? Like the energy, the drive, the enthusiasm.
You know, August, I think if anything's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I've never played for second place. I always wanted to do really well at whatever I did. And so, you know, I think I'm probably the least technologically savvy person that exists, but I realize that technology is very, very important. I mean, I'll take you back 40 years ago. When I started in the business, I had no cell phone, no fax machine, no computer on my desk. We carried rolls of quarters around to go to the phone booth on the corner of the street to make calls to people. Today, the world has changed dramatically. But I think the extent to which the world has changed over the past 40 years is going to get blown away by how it's going to change over the next 5. So I've been very, very aware that I have to get up to speed on technology. And I'm also a very big fan of a great writer, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who has a series of books with Dan Sullivan. One of them is Who Not How. And the thesis of that book is when you say, gee, that's a good idea, how am I going to do that? You're asking the wrong question. It's, gee, that's a great idea. Who am I going to get to do that for me? So when I started my new company about 6 months ago, I knew I had to adapt new technologies. I had to get up the curve on utilizing AI. And so I hired a COO from the tech world. He's an expert at AI. He's started tech companies. He worked in driverless cars for 5 years. And I figured if he can make a car drive itself, he can help me sell some buildings. So we're constantly looking to adapt to a changing environment, always sticking true to our core values, but adapt with changing strategies, changing tactics. And so I think if anything, I'm very mindful that it's important to really stay at the forefront of change. And so like people are surprised to hear that I have a broker coach, but I've worked with Rod Santomassimo at the Massimo Group for 13 years now. And people say to me, Bob, why do you do that? You have a great track record, you sell a lot of buildings, you have great clients. And I say, you know why? Because I don't know everything. And maybe there's some kid in Topeka, Kansas, that's going to come up with a better way to do something. And if I'm working with a coach who's coaching brokers all over North America, the probability that I find out what that kid in Topeka is doing before somebody else does is pretty high. So always want to try to stay ahead of the curve a little bit and make sure we're doing everything as effectively and efficiently as possible, because ultimately that's in the best interest of your clients. You're going to get a better execution for your client, a better outcome for your client. And at the end of the day, that's why we're here, to get better results for our client.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bob, like, unfortunately, pride gets in the way of a lot of people, right? It gets in the way of their success at times. People think that they're the best at what they do. So they take their foot off the gas when it comes to marketing. And I'm obviously talking about the unconventional marketing. But in your case, as you just mentioned, you're pretty much on every podcast we could find, right? He's everywhere. Yes. But it's this hunger for continued growth and success after 40 years of being in the business that's so motivational. And we always say, like, I think it's an average of 42 episodes that a podcast really lasts. And then people
miss that consistency and that resilience.
Yeah, exactly. They just don't have the resilience. So it's so nice to hear where your drive comes from, Bob. And I mean,
well, Ava, I think one of the things that strikes me is that the brokerage business affords people many, many opportunities to win just in the life cycle of one transaction. And, I laugh when they talk about kids on cell phones. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she's always on her cell phone. And they say that the kids are on it all the time because they get this dopamine rush from positive feedback they get from different things that they see online. And I think in the same way, brokerage gives me that dopamine rush. So I have a client call up and say, hey, I'm thinking about selling my building. Boom, I get that rush. And then, you're going in to give the pitch and you get pumped up, and you go in and they say, hey, that was a great pitch. We're going to hire you. You get pumped up, and then you're marketing the building and you reach agreement on the terms and conditions of a sale, and you get pumped up, and then you sign the contract, you get pumped up, you close the deal, you get pumped up. And I think you kind of get addicted to this winning aspect that comes in the life cycle of a transaction. And if you're doing 30, 40 transactions at once, that's a lot of dopamine that's flying around. So
Definitely.
it's a really great,
Mhm.
great business, and I really love it.
Bob, where does your drive come from? Like, what's the foundation? Like, what's your why? I mean, gosh, you sold your company to Cushman and Wakefield for $100 million. Most people would be playing golf, not showing up to the office every day, especially the, post-COVID era.
Yeah, I know, that's a very interesting question, Abe. I think some of it probably comes from insecurity. Some of it comes from wanting to succeed. Some of it comes from things that kind of the way you grew up. I grew up very modestly. This past weekend, took my wife and daughter out to look at the house I grew up in Maywood, and it's about 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, and grew up, had everything that I could have wanted, but I remember when I started in the business, I had 5 permanent press shirts, and every Saturday I'd put them in the washing machine and get them out of the washing machine, hang them on hangers on a clothesline in my parents' basement, and I remember we were selling a townhouse for this guy named Richard Plen. I can't believe I remember his name. This was 1984, just started in the business. We're selling a townhouse, and go into this guy's closet, and he must have had 150 shirts, and 30 of them were still in the wrapper from the store. They hadn't even opened them yet. And I just thought that was the coolest thing I ever saw. And I said, someday I'm going to have more shirts. And I think there's something in me that always made me want to succeed. And I think that hasn't gone away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In our research, Bob, there was some data you provided that, in Manhattan, south of 96th Street, there is around 27,500 buildings, and the average turnover for these buildings is 2.6% per annum, I'm guessing. And that works out to be 75 buildings per year that are being traded in Manhattan. What is your market share of that?
Yeah, actually, it's you were very close, Augie. Very good. 27,649. The average turnover is 2.6%. That's about 719 sales per year.
Okay, got it.
So it's a lot of activity, and that's just Manhattan south of 96th Street.
Yes.
So if you look at the average year in New York City, where if the average is 2.6% in Manhattan in the outer boroughs, and the outer boroughs, we don't cover Staten Island. No disrespect to Staten Island, but that market functions more like New Jersey than New York. But in Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, there are an additional 130,000 buildings, and the average turnover in the outer boroughs is 2.2% annually. But there are about 3,600 transactions in the average year in New York. So it's a lot of activity. So there's certainly enough to go around for everybody. And that's kind of an interesting point too. I think that there are 2 main philosophies that I've seen people have. First philosophy is that sales is a zero-sum game, and a win for you means a loss for me, so I don't ever want you to win. And the other philosophy is an abundance mentality, where you say, hey, you just won that one. Good for you. I'm going to go get mine. There's plenty to go around for everybody. And I think the folks who have that abundance mentality generally are a lot happier. And in most markets, there really is enough to go around for everybody. Certainly in New York, that's the case.
That's incredible, that abundance mentality. When I first met August, he had that abundance mentality, and he really taught me that abundance mentality, but it's really driven us to
You don't want to give up the farm either, right?
You don't want to give up
abundance mentality. Like tell everybody about your, you know,
your success secret.
secrets.
Right.
But no, definitely.
I want to talk about a little.
One point I'll follow up on that too, because that brings up an interesting point, is that you know, I've never been afraid to share openly about what I do and how I do it. In fact, my coach Rod wrote a book called "Knowing Isn't Doing," and you know, I write a periodic column for the Commercial Observer, which is a real estate newspaper here in New York. And once or twice a year, I would write something about the traits that I see in top brokers or tips for brokers to do better. And occasionally, you know, I invariably get 2 or 3 people come to Bob, why do you write that? You're giving your competition all these tips. And I always say, you know what? There's a big difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And unfortunately, most people just don't do it. They don't follow through. And so I think actually doing things is one of the keys. Is if you think you have a good idea or you want to try something new, you have to actually do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Bob, let's switch the conversation a little bit to data. How do you guys collect data? Do you use conventional data sources like CoStar, Yardi, or are you guys more boots on the ground where you have a team that actually calls the owners to extract information from them?
Yeah, well, it depends on what segments of the market we're talking about. We basically go right into New York City records. There's a system called the ACRIS system. I don't know what the letters stand for, but we call it ACRIS. But you go in and you see the daily transfers. And then anytime a development site sells, I call the buyer and the seller of that site myself and get additional information, because usually there are so many moving parts that you want to know if there were any bonus programs available, were there any adverse environmental conditions, were there any tenants that had to be bought out, all things that, unless you speak to the buyer and seller, wouldn't be recorded in the public record. Most third-party aggregators of information are not able to get that, because what's the incentive for a principal in a transaction to give someone they don't know and probably can't benefit from inside information about their transaction? So we do a lot of that verification ourselves, and you know, get to the heart of what really made that transaction tick. So for land sales, I do that calling myself. We have a team of folks that do office to resi conversions, multifamily, retail, but we're out there gathering that data on a proprietary basis.
Yeah, you're also synonymous with having these floor plans or you know, images in your office all over the walls. Talk to us about that.
The maps, the Knakal map room. That was, excuse me, that was one of my COVID projects.
Okay.
Was actually, I took the time to walk every block of Manhattan south of 96th Street, looking at buildings that were under construction and potential development sites, highlighting a tax lot map with different colors for different things, and ended up with a map that today is 24 feet long and 10 feet wide, and has identified on it every single development site that's under contract or that's under construction, recent sales activity, and we're coming out with a land index looking at sales going all the way back to 1984, disaggregating them into land sales for residential rental, condo, hotel, office, and a miscellaneous bucket. So much of the real estate business is not really about real estate. I always say our business is the information and relationship business. So the better quality your information is, the more of a competitive advantage you have. And you want to use that information to forge very strong relationships with clients who will come back to you time and time again.
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
I love that.
Switching the conversation a bit again here, talking about, you know, we're in the private equity space and the investing, you know, real estate investment space. I want to kind of chat about that a bit. You know, in my time over the years, I've met some incredible, tremendous real estate brokers, particularly in the commercial space. Some of them who've, you know, were well educated, well organized, you know, had the gift of gab, you know, given to them by God. And, you know, sometimes I really think I am lucky that they're not coming into my space or our space. You've been in the big game for 40 years. Have you, I'm sure this is going to be the case that you've seen, and excuse my French here, but some absolute clowns doing really well in the investing business, coming in, former chiropractors, or somebody had no business being in real estate, coming in and actually doing really well. But I mean, at times that doesn't last. But have you ever wondered, coming onto the dark side over the last 40 years, saying, hey, these people that are coming in doing so well in investing, especially the syndication world starting in 2012, 2013, when the Jobs Act allowed for people to raise capital kind of from the members of the public. Did that ever kind of, you ever thought about that? Or have you ever thought about, hey, being an investor rather than just being the broker or starting an actual investment firm, private equity firm? But talk to us about that, because it seems to be a normal, a natural evolution, but I don't see a lot of brokers becoming investors. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, actually, there are a number of investors here in New York that started as office leasing brokers and evolved into developers and investors in office buildings and have done very, very well. I've never switched over or been tempted to switch over to the ownership side of the business, and for two reasons mainly. Firstly, in the 26 years and 46 days of running Massey Knakal, every waking moment that I was working, I wanted to work on trying to figure out how to make that company as valuable as possible. I didn't want to divert my attention away from that objective by looking at buying properties or anything else that would take me away from that. And then after selling the firm, I got to be a little bit introspective and think about what I wanted to do in the future. Did I want to buy property? And it occurred to me that, I really, it sounds really weird, but I really don't know that much about it. I think it's a full-time job to be a property buyer. And I also didn't want to have conflicts of interest with my clients. So if my clients knew that I bought property as well as brokered property, I never wanted to have to answer the question when I offered them one of the buildings I was selling, to have them say, well, Bob, if this is such a great deal, why didn't you buy it?
Right.
So always try to, keep things very, very simple. Don't like conflicts of interest. I never want to have to remember what I say to anybody. That's why, our value proposition of only selling buildings, only representing sellers, only working on exclusives, only working in New York, keeps our value proposition very clear, not opaque at all. I said that in 6 seconds, and there's nothing vague about it. And I just keeping things simple has been something that's worked for me.
Fair enough. Hyper focused on your craft, so no bother with distractions. So
No
great.
shiny object syndrome,
Yeah, no,
which is
absolutely.
really good.
Quickly on that, what's your advice to brokers who are doing well but have kind of are seeing kind of on the other side investors doing? Should they venture into that? Like, what is your advice there to a younger
Well, look,
broker?
I think it depends what they really want. What are your objectives? What do you want to achieve? Like I said, I know a number of my friends who are brokers and they buy property and they do very well. They're very happy. I'm happy for them. It's just something that hasn't worked for me. And I think you can't paint the market with a very broad brush. The same thing doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
So there may be folks who think, hey, I really want to buy property. And, if I had purchased some property and had good depreciation, maybe things would be different for me. But I'm not regretting that. I'm not going back in time. But I think everyone has a different risk tolerance. Everybody has different objectives that they want to achieve. And so for me, it just was easier to keep life simple and just focus on getting listings and selling buildings and not worrying about other things.
Great. Being in New York, I mean, obviously the Big Apple, city of big shots. I was reading The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. He talks about when he built Trump Tower and he's selling these condos to Japanese and Arabs coming over and what have you. He actually went and got his real estate license, and he was going there selling the condos because the brokerage fee was so high. But talk to us about I always see you on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter, having dinners with a lot of different kind of individuals in our space. In your time, have you have you rubbed shoulders with any kind of famous people, Trumps of the world, or on the institutional side, like Blackstone, Steve Schwarzmans of the world, or any kind of heads of state, you know, kind of Gulf rich nations coming over? Talk to us about any stories you can share about any kind of
Sure.
the ones that you can.
Yeah, no, look, there are a lot of folks that I view as celebrities that other people may not. And certainly there are a lot of normal celebrities that are all over the place in New York. You go to a restaurant, and, you know, I've been at plenty of places where I've been having dinner next to Wilbur Ross or Clive Davis or Danny DeVito or Woody Allen. And that comes with the territory in New York, which is great. But,
Mhm.
you know, the real celebrities to me are the real estate titans of our industry, like Larry Silverstein, and Steve Roth and Steve Ross and Jeff Blau. And now you're gonna get me in trouble, August, asking me this question, because now I'm mentioning people and I know I'm gonna forget people. So I'm gonna stop naming names, because I don't want to mention too
Sure.
many and leave people out.
How
But,
about doing
you know,
business
those
with any
folks
of them?
are the
How
heroes
about
to me.
Sure. How about doing business with any of them? How about selling any properties to any big names around the world? Any kind of, I mean, the Russian oligarchs at some point, there are a lot of them coming and buying New York real estate. You got the Chinese, you got Japanese prior to that in the 80s and early 90s. Is any big names you can, or even people within the US, any big names coming and buy? I mean, I'm a big boxing follower, boxing fan, and Floyd Mayweather always talks about buying a building in New York. Any big names or celebrities you can share that he actually sold any properties to?
Yeah, well, I will tell you why Floyd Mayweather bought a building in New York. Because he was with a buddy of mine, Jeff Sutton, who's a huge investor here in New York. And Jeff, you know, Floyd was saying that his last fight, he got $100 million for the fight. And Jeff called Floyd a dentist. Floyd said, "A dentist? What are you talking about?" He says, "You only get paid when you work. I'm sitting here with you enjoying our night out, and I'm getting paid right now. I own real estate, and I'm going to sit here, and my tenants are paying me rent." And I
Right.
think that Jeff was the one actually who convinced Floyd to get into the real estate business.
Okay.
But yeah, lots of interesting folks. We always are dealing with people from all over the globe. I think at last count, I have sold properties to investors from 47 different countries.
Wow.
And it is always somebody coming into New York thinking they want a piece of the Big Apple. And, you know, a lot of these folks are really very, very prominent in their own industries if they're not real estate people. But a lot of interesting folks we rub shoulders with here in New York.
Sure. I guess you can't share any big names. Not a problem. I try to extract.
Confidential,
I try-
August. A lot of
I
this is confidential.
try to extract it, but that's totally fine.
Speaking about doing business with brokers, Bob, we have a good friend of ours. His name is Bo Berry, and he actually wrote a book on how to be an elite real estate investor. His book is called Multifamily Investors Who Dominate, and he teaches this concept where brokers have a black book, okay, where they keep score of the type of clients they have, you know, the type of investors that they're working with, the people that come through. And really, when you burn bridges, I mean, your name goes and it can go very bad in the industry. And brokers are going to be reluctant to work with you. So do you have any juicy stories on deals where something either went wrong or, you know, a buyer maybe retraded, maybe in the great financial crisis, the GFC or the COVID era, where there was like this chaotic ensued?
Oh, yeah, that happens all the time, particularly
Yeah.
in markets. The retrade happens, and that's another reason why I like just representing sellers, because I'm always just fighting to get the
Mhm.
buyers to toe the line and not do the retrade. The best way to make that happen is to be very, very transparent about everything. When we put our marketing materials together, we show obviously all the good things, the compelling things about the property, but we also show all the warts also, because we don't want something to come up at the last minute and have the buyer say, "Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I have to adjust my price accordingly." So there are many different tactics and strategies that we've implemented to give leverage to our clients who are the sellers, not let buyers do that to the extent we can prevent it. And I'll just share one story with you. We had a big development site that we were selling in the Nomad area, and the contract price was about $90 million. The buyer had put up a $9 million deposit, but wanted a long closing period. Normally, closing periods here are 60 to 90 days. He wanted a 9-month closing period. Based on the price he was paying, the seller agreed. And I think what happened, that was at a time where the market had just picked up so significantly. Everybody was really, really busy. And I believe that this buyer, who's a very, very big investor in New York, owns dozens of properties, I think he forgot about the closing. And he called up the day before the closing and said, "Oh, Bob, we're supposed to close tomorrow. Please send me the rent roll again. Send me an updated rent roll." And sent him the rent roll, the same one that was attached to the contract of sale. And he said, "Oh, this is the wrong rent roll. You, the seller's breached. I want my money back." And ended up defaulting and losing a $9 million deposit because I think he forgot when the closing period was.
Wow.
Oh my
Another funny story. I have one of my best buying clients that I've sold a lot of properties to is the hotel developer, Sam Cheng. And many years ago, I was selling him, which is going to sound like a very small property, but for New York, it's not so small, but a little 50 by 100-foot development site where he was going to build a hotel over on West 33rd Street. And I forget the address, so I'm making it up, but let's just say it was 325 West 33rd. And it just so happened that 335 West 35th Street was the same exact 50 by 100-foot parking lot. There were two parking lots, same size, same numbered address, just one on 33rd Street, one on 35th Street. Sam signs the contract. Day before the closing, calls me up and says, "Hey, Bob, is that property I'm buying on 35th Street or 33rd Street?" And I said, "Sam, it's on 33rd Street." He's like, "Oh, I thought I was buying on 35th Street." And Sam, being the guy he is, he closed on the building anyway, even though on the site, even though he thought he was buying a different property. So, sometimes these things happen, and it's always something is, an interesting story for every transaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going back to Ava's question though, is it true that some of the top brokers keep record of buyers who don't deliver, who retrade, who make the life of the broker miserable? Does that go around the kind of fraternity and kind of get passed around that, hey, don't deal with this guy because he will make your life living hell? Is that true?
Without a doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
we're always dealing with people who we don't know. And so if Mr. or Mrs. X comes in on one of our buildings and is interested and makes a bid and we don't know them, the first thing we'll do is call our colleagues at other firms and say, "Hey, have you ever worked with this person? What can you tell me about them?" And the worst thing you could do to a broker is retrade and try to jerk around and not do what you say. And that will absolutely get around. And, reputation is so important in our business. You could work a lifetime to make a great reputation, and one or two slip-ups can really hurt. So it's really important to do the right thing. Sometimes there are very legitimate reasons why someone can't fulfill what they said they were going to do. But I think it's the way that you explain it, the rationale for it, the returning the call, taking the call, making the explanation. I think the way you handle it says a lot about, how your actions will be interpreted by the people you're wanting to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we take this very seriously at CPI Capital. Our last deal that we closed on, we showed the brokers, hey, we can close on time as we promised. We can raise the capital, the $10.5 million of equity that was needed. And it really, cemented that relationship for us. And brokers talk. So I tell everybody, we're very, very serious about the relationships that we have with our brokers.
If you don't treat brokers right, you become the buyer of last resort.
Exactly.
And you don't want to be the buyer of last resort. You want to be the first call, not the last call.
And you said it's all about relationships too. So, but Bob, given that I love stories so much, I was going to ask you, can you give us the greatest rags to riches story that you have ever seen in your 40 years? And then if you can tell us about the riches to rags story when maybe an institution or someone possibly lost it all.
Well, I will. I'm happy to tell you. I don't know if it's a true rags to riches story, but I will tell you what I think is the greatest real estate deal that I've seen in my career. There was a a factoring company in the garment center that would routinely make loans to companies that were active in the garment business in New York. And they would take all kinds of things as collateral, inventory of garments, a painting somebody had on the wall. And the offices that these folks had these unbelievable, like museum quality artwork all over that were collateral for loans that they ended up taking back. But in the 1980s, this firm made a $4 million loan on a parking lot over in the Hudson Yards area. This was at a time when Hudson Yards was not what Hudson Yards is today. It was a lot of industrial type buildings, a lot of not so legal things going on after 3 o'clock in the afternoon in this neighborhood. If you were in that neighborhood after 3 p.m., you were trying to get in trouble somehow. And so there's a huge parking lot over on 34th Street, and Rosenthal and Rosenthal made a $4 million mortgage on their property and ended up foreclosing on it and took it back. And about, I guess it was 8-9 years ago, they hired me to sell that parking lot for them, and we sold it for $238 million. So
Wow.
they went from making a $4 million loan to selling it for $238 million. That was a fantastic transaction.
Wow.
In terms of the riches to rags story, I certainly wouldn't give any specific names, but I will tell you that today we have a lot of folks that unfortunately are seeing a lot of their net worth wiped out by virtue of the interest rate policy that our Federal Reserve Bank has implemented. It is really, really tragic what has happened. And I think it's a statement that public policy here is so highly correlated to the way markets function. In our multifamily sector, we have a rent regulation system that essentially creates a disincentive to invest in the housing stock. It's implemented in the name of protecting tenants, but it actually is hurting the tenants because the quality of the housing stock is deteriorating. There's no incentive to build new housing. So the supply is constrained. Every politician says they want rents to be more affordable for everybody, yet every single housing policy that's been implemented or ignored since 2018 in New York has done nothing but constricted supply and exerted upward pressure on rents, making New York less affordable for everybody. And I think what we've seen with the interest rate policy, where a lot of folks have mortgages at 3.5%, and if you want to refinance today, you have to pay the mortgage down by 25 to 35%. Your rate is going to be double what you were paying, and even with that 25 or 35% pay down of the mortgage, your mortgage payment's going up significantly. So that is really causing a lot of stress for a lot of folks, and it's really heartbreaking to see that so much equity has been eroded based on this interest rate policy that didn't really have to be.
Touching back on kind of rent control, New York has historically always been sets the precedent when it comes to large urban cities around the world. When it comes to rent control, I don't know the exact kind of details, but you can rent. There's also kind of government initiatives or government-owned buildings within New York. You pay like $2,000 a month rent, but the actual rent for that unit is like $10,000. Wanted to get your thesis. I mean, Vancouver, where we live part-time, is also dealing with that. We have the downtown east side, a part of Vancouver, where it's right in the downtown, is full of people that are drug users, people that are have mental health. The streets, it looks like a war zone. There's tents, people using drugs on the streets. New York had the similar issues. Rudy Giuliani came in, cleaned that up. A lot of different measures that were put in, but they seem to go hand in hand. Poverty, drug use, mental health, housing, they seem to go hand in hand. And every time government steps in, they actually with the housing projects is another issue that U.S. has had. Give us your you touched on it a bit there, but give us your thesis on that, because when it comes to New York, and I see a post you did on Twitter as well, as educating the policymakers, Give us your thesis. Somebody here in in government, in City Hall hears this in the municipal level across Canada or other places around the world. What advice do you have for
Yeah,
policymakers when it
well,
comes to?
here's what I say. I think it's very simple. And I've had this conversation with the mayor of New York and with the governor of New York. The solution to all of New York's housing problems can be solved very simply with more supply. And when I say that, we have policymakers here that truly believe that economics doesn't work. But even if you believe that an Econ 101 textbook is capitalist propaganda, you don't have to look any further than the pandemic. During the pandemic in 2020, people left the city in droves. So many apartments were vacant. All of that vacancy was effectively an addition to the supply of apartments. And what happened? Rents dropped by 30% in Manhattan. There is not a housing policy that's been implemented anywhere in the United States that made rents go down 10%. You had a 30% drop in rents because of the addition to supply. So why aren't you, as a policymaker, doing everything you possibly can to incentivize the creation of new housing? So what our policymakers have done, unfortunately, is they think they're protecting tenants, and that leads to more votes. But it's a fallacy to think that you are going to create new housing at very, very low affordability levels, and it's still going to make sense to build that building. You have to strike the right balance. Like we had a program that worked very, very effectively for a long, long time called the 421A tax abatement program. That lapsed. It came back, and the new program called Affordable New York, that wasn't quite as good as 421A, but was a little better. Now we have the next iteration of that policy, which is called 485X. It is a housing program that has with it, because our policymakers needed to appease union workers, it has minimum wages that just don't make any sense. So you implemented a policy that's going to show very, very little in the way of new construction, and that's not what we need. I'll give you the most glaring example of this is I'll take you all the way back to 1978. Maybe you like stories, so you like this story. 1978, Yankees and the Dodgers are playing in the World Series, and Reggie Jackson is famously hitting all those home runs, 4 home runs in a row. And the Goodyear blimp is over Yankee Stadium, and it pans out, and there are 6 fires going on within 3 blocks of Yankee Stadium. And why were those fires going on? They were going on because in those days, it made more sense to burn your building down and collect the insurance money than to invest in the building. So the city very wisely created 2 programs to incentivize the private sector to invest in housing. One was called the Major Capital Improvement Program, where you got benefits and the ability to raise rents if you did things that helped the whole building. Put in a new boiler, put in a new roof, renovated the lobby, renovated the staircase, put in new windows in the whole building, things that upgraded living conditions for people. Second program was called the Individual Apartment Improvement Program, where you also would do renovations to the apartment, and you were able to pass along the cost of that in higher rents to the tenants. And so you would put in new flooring, new kitchens, new bathroom, new sheetrock, new lighting. And so again, better living conditions, and you were able to raise rents on apartments. And in 1978, the dilapidation rate in New York was 14%, meaning that 14% of the housing units were deemed uninhabitable because of their condition. In 2019, the dilapidation rate was 0.04%, because these 2 programs incentivize the private sector to dump tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. So in 2019, our policymakers marginalized both of those programs. So now when an apartment that was renting for $700 a month, that in the old days, you do a complete gut renovation of that apartment and put it back on the market at $4,000 a month. Today, you are unable to do that. So
Right.
what happens when the tenant leaves the $700 a month apartment? The landlord nails the door shut.
Yeah.
And so we have
Why was there?
tens of thousands of these, tens of thousands, some estimate 60 to 80,000 apartments that are nailed shut. That, what is it doing? It's constricting supply. It's
Yeah.
exerting upward pressure on rents. Tenants have less choice. Doesn't make economic sense to do this. And so all you have to do is reinstate these two programs that worked so beautifully. Think about how economically stimulative that would be. You'd have 60 to 80,000 units under gut renovation within 2 weeks.
Yes.
How many toilets are you going to sell? Excuse me. How many sinks? How much sheetrock? How much flooring? It would be billions of dollars in economic stimulus
Yeah.
to do this, but we need more supply. So my message, whenever I talk to an elected official, say, we need more apartments. You have more apartments, it's going to be more affordable for everybody.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Last
Great
question
story.
before we get to the next segment of our show. You know, we want you to kind of give us your opinion on this. If real estate, real estate, I mean, it's such a broad ecosystem. You have a lot of different markets within real estate. I mean, office space currently is not doing well, just because of you know, post-COVID era and what have you. And a lot of those office units are not really usable for today's you know, the office, you know, people work in cubicles and what have you. But looking at it overall, if you want to look at commercial real estate, that's fine. If real estate was a real estate cycle was a clock, 12 o'clock being on top of the market, 6 o'clock being the bottom of the market, where does Bob Knakal believe we are today? What time?
I think we are at the beginning of a correction. I would say going from 6 o'clock up towards 12, but we're probably only at 7 or 8. But it's definitely looking brighter. And one interesting thing about this correction that's very different from past corrections that I've lived through is that different product sectors are performing differently. Our retail market is doing very well, but it started to be negatively impacted years before anything else. Our hotel market has very strong fundamentals today. Our industrial market is strong. Our multifamily market is hurting. We have policy that's going against the industry. We have interest rates that have gone against the industry. Our Class A new construction office sector is doing pretty well. Good demand, high rents. Our B and C office sector is facing challenges. That is probably going to be disaggregated into 3 buckets: a bucket of buildings that will be upgraded and stay office buildings, a group that will be converted to residential, and then a third group that is simply going to be demolished. So I think that we're heading into a time where, because we have these different sectors moving in different directions, where in 2025, we are going to have a very robust group of discretionary sellers who are going to sell because, as you said earlier, the average turnover rate in New York has been 2.6%. We've been below trend for 7 years in a row. There is pent-up demand to sell in the system. And now those sectors that are doing well with prices going up a little bit, people are going to take advantage of that and sell. So robust discretionary selling, while at the same time, robust non-discretionary selling, where people can't afford to refi. They don't have the cash to put into refi, or if they have the cash, they're going to choose not to pump it in to a building. They'll be forced to sell. And so we've never had this confluence of those two things. Normally, in good times, there's a ton of discretionary sellers. In bad times, there's a ton of non-discretionary sellers. Because the market is moving in different ways, we're going to have discretionary and non-discretionary sellers very, very active at the same time. So the highest turnover that we've ever seen was in 2012, where turnover was 4.3% of the stock. That was catalyzed by a capital gains tax increase that was buried in our healthcare law that was going to kick in 2013, forced a lot of people to sell in 2012. But so 4.3 has been the previous high over the last 40 years. I think we're going to see turnover next year in New York over 5%.
Wow.
And
Nice.
I already feel it. It's starting to bubble. It's happening, and bubble by, I mean, it's starting to really become tangible. We're getting many more offers every day now on the properties that we're selling. And I think 2025, from a transactional volume point of view, is going to be off the charts great.
Incredible. Thank you so much for your advice and wisdom. We're going to get into our next segment of our show.
All right. I'm excited for this segment with Bob. It's called the 10 Championship Rounds to Financial Freedom. Bob, are you ready for the questions?
I'm ready, Ava. Let's go.
Okay, here we go. First question. Who's been the most influential person in your life?
I have to say probably my mom. My mom unfortunately passed away in 1983. But she taught me a lot of my values, was always there when I needed her. And yeah, I definitely say my mom.
That's beautiful, Bob. Next question. What is the #1 book you'd recommend?
Oh gosh, so many. First, go to bobknakal.com. I actually have a suggested reading list on there. Again, the Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy's series of books are great. Who Not How, 10X is Easier Than 2X, The Gap and the Gain. Jim Collins' Good to Great is fantastic. I love the Harvey Mackay books. The books by Bob Cialdini on persuasion, I think, are great for salespeople. The Power of a Positive No by Harvard professor Bill Urey. The Art of Woo by one of my Wharton professors, Richard Shell. So many great books. Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi. Great stuff out there. Take a look at my list. That is one of the things that, I think there should be a curriculum in college. We learn, you take an accounting class and you learn that prepaid rent is, I forget, a debit or a credit on the balance sheet. Who cares? You're never going to use that. Teach kids about likability, salesmanship, human behavior, relationship building. Those are the things that will tangibly help people throughout their whole life. And many of these books have all those lessons in them. I love reading that stuff.
Incredible.
I love it. Hey, August, those like 10 Audible. I was like, write down some books that you want. I got 10 Audible or 20 Audible. Now thank you, Bob. You just solved a problem that I had. I'm gonna look into a lot of those books that you just mentioned. So thank you for that. Okay, my next question is, if you had the opportunity to travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, well, I think that I would say to become more of an expert at one thing. For most of my career, I've been a generalist. Today, I'm focusing much more on development opportunities. But I really think that the way you create true value in yourself as a broker is in specializing in one thing and becoming known as the expert in that particular thing.
Yeah.
And you want that area to be small enough that you can know every single thing about it, but large enough that you can make a good living doing it. And there are some downsides to that, because the 1 year multifamily will be hot, and the next year industrial will be hot, and the next year, you're going to have ebbs and flows. But I think if you really want to turn your career and transition from being a deal-to-deal person and a broker that creates an annuity for life, being an expert is the way to create that annuity.
Absolutely love that, Bob. All right. The next question is, what's the best investment you've ever made?
Best investment I ever made was probably buying the highlighters and walking the streets of Manhattan to create my map. It has been by far and away the best marketing tool that I've ever created. Over the course of my career, I've won 26% of my pitches. I've given 25 pitches in the map room. I've gotten 25 exclusives. And I know I'm going to lose one of these days, but it has really been the best thing I've ever created. And I'm proud to see that there are map rooms popping up all over the country now because of social media, and I think it's great. But for me personally, to have done that was something I've wanted to do for years. My only regret is I wish I had done it 30 years ago. Yeah. But that absolutely was the best investment of time, not necessarily money, but the investment of time. 220 hours out in the field walking the streets. But the best thing I ever did by a long shot.
That's incredible. I love that. Now, Bob, what's the worst investment you've ever made? And what lessons did you learn from
The
it?
worst investment I ever made, because I'll take you back again to my my third summer working at Coldwell Banker. And I still, I still was the Wharton guy, still thought Wall Street was kind of a cool thing. So I took the salary that I made for all 3 summers, and I bought stock in a company called Braniff Airlines, which ended up going out of business. I lost all the money,
Oh,
and
no.
I have not bought a share of stock since.
Wow.
Wow. Look at that. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Next question, Bob. If you can have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh gosh, I think it would be really interesting to have dinner with Babe Ruth. I think and in a New York restaurant, I think that would be that would probably be really interesting. And then I have to say, I think I would really get a kick out of having a few drinks and dinner with Frank Sinatra in Vegas. And
Legendary.
those would be 2 things I think would be pretty cool to do.
Incredible.
Awesome. Okay. Next question. How much would you need in the bank to retire today? What's your number?
There is no number. I will never retire, and I don't think it's about how much you have. Like I said, I truly, truly love this business, and I get so much enjoyment out of it that I will never retire. I've said for many, many years, I've said that when they put me in the ground, I'll have deals under contract, and my wife is going to have to collect those commissions. So I'm not retiring anytime soon.
Yeah, we can definitely see that within you. That's amazing. All right, next question, Bob. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing now?
Ava, I've been asked that question a few times, and I have to tell you honestly, I've never thought about it. I have no idea. I've done this my whole life, and there are other things I enjoy doing, but my life is very simple. I spend time with my wife and daughter. I sell buildings. I go to church. I work out, and that's it. So I'm very happy with the way my life is, and I can't imagine doing anything else. I've never really thought about it. I don't have an answer to that one.
Amazing. Now we know you love books and whatnot, but this is my favorite question. Book smarts or street smarts?
Oh, definitely street smart. I was not a good student. I got into the Wharton School. I'm not ashamed to say I got in because my high school baseball coach was the baseball coach at Penn. My grades alone were not good enough to get me in, and I think my GPA was probably somewhere between 2 and 2.5 at Penn, but good enough to graduate, which I'm very proud of. I'm proud to say I'm a Wharton alum, but definitely I'm a street guy. Love rolling my sleeves up, getting my fingernails dirty in this business, and most of the folks that I deal with are high net worth individuals and families. And so I think it's a good combination, but definitely more of the street smart than the book smart.
Amazing. Okay, last question, Bob. If you had $1 million in cash and you had to make one investment today, what would it be?
I would buy, what would I buy? I would buy gold, I think is a good investment. There's a lot of craziness going on in the world today, so I think gold is safe. If I had to buy real estate, I'd buy one of 2 things. I would buy properties in New York City around major transportation hubs, because I think our city planning commission is going to have to continue to increase density around transportation. When they increase density, they increase value. So I think that's a good play. Or well-located properties in Manhattan. I think Manhattan is super duper cheap today. I think now is the buying opportunity of a lifetime. So I think if you believe in the future of New York, now is the time to buy property here. So I would probably buy a well-located property in Manhattan.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bob.
Yeah, Bob, just quickly let everybody know who's listening. What's the best way that they can reach you, please?
Yeah, best way to reach me, you can always email me at bk@bkrea.com or follow me on social media, DM me. I'm on most of the major social media platforms, and I'd love to hear your questions and communicate with you. And I have to say, guys, thank you so much for having me on. This has really been a blast. You asked me a lot of questions that I don't get asked often, and I love that.
Amazing.
Appreciate you.
We really
Thank you,
enjoyed
my
the
friend.
show. Thanks, Bob. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope this conversation enlightened you on how to win big in this highly profitable and risk-averse space. Get on your feet and embrace this world that offers so many opportunities just waiting for you out there. Continue your journey to becoming a savvy real estate expert by subscribing to the show at cpicapital.ca. Don't forget to leave a positive rating and share with your friends. See you on the next one.